I'd like to just introduce my very, very special guest today, and I'm really honoured to have him sat next to me here, the wonderful Charlie Landsborough, who writes wonderful songs, and also he's got a fantastic story to tell about his life, not just his life in terms of being a performer. He's a Christian man. He's worked in every kind of venue that you don't want to work in, and every kind of venue that you do want to work in. Charlie, thanks very much for coming to see us today.
Good to meet you, Tim.
Charlie, the youngest of 11 kids.
I know I don't look as though I was ever the youngest of anything, do I? But yeah, I had a wonderful upbringing, and it doesn't sound very grand because I grew up in the dockside house, and the scene from the front window was the docks, the coal wharf, the railway lines, the Vacuum Oil Company. But the house I grew up in, being the youngest, I was doted upon by my mother. My brothers were all seafarers who came back from all quarters of the earth with gifts from me. So I had a boat from Africa, silk jackets from Japan, and all sorts of wonderful things. And there was music constantly in the house. My dad sang, my mother sang, my brothers brought the first guitars we'd ever seen. And, you know, it was incredible.
Were your mum and dad performers?
My dad was a performer who was sort of billed locally as the silver voiced tenor. He just stood stock still and sang, you know, all the old ballads. So I grew up loving all the old ballad singers, and then along with the guitar along came Elvis and everybody else, and my brothers with the country music of Hank Williams and Jimmy Rogers. And we had animals in the house all the time as well. We had chickens in the back, we had a duck which attacked everybody, we had dogs and cats, lovebirds from Africa, and a monkey at one stage.
So it was busy, your house, wasn't it?
It was fantastic. I mean, I went back and looked at it before they pulled it down, and I was amazed that all these people had lived in this small space with all these wonderful animals, you know. So it was a great upbringing, and one that was completely surrounded by love and music. A great combination.
So did you know from being very young that you wanted to be a performer? I mean, was that, or did that come later?
No, I mean, my great love as a small boy was football. I wanted to be a footballer.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my mum when she wasn't very well, you know, I said, it's all right, Mum, when I grow up, I'm going to perform at Wembley. And I did perform at Wembley, but it was with a guitar, not with a ball, you know. But no, I was an incredibly shy lad. And when I picked the guitar up, I thought I'd found like one of the best friends anybody could have given me. But I still had to struggle to shrug off this sort of cocoon of shyness, if you like, to go and perform, which I started to do. Once I was 18, I'd step into the local pubs and sit in a corner and just sing all night. But I had no sort of, I didn't have any sort of ideas about sort of fame and fortune.
No.
I just loved the music.
You just loved doing it,
burned in me.
What, how many sisters and brothers do you have? I know you're one of 11, but how many sisters have you got?
I've got four, well I had four, had four sisters, four brothers, and two sisters had died before I came on the scene.
Right.
My father, the first husband of my mother, he drowned in the dock, and he had 6 small children. And my dad married her with 6 small children. Because her mother said, Aggie, you'll have to put them in a home, you can't look after them. And my dad said, I'll marry her, I'll look after them. And of course then we came along.
Fantastic, man.
So it was it's half of the family were England's and half the family were Landsborough's, but I always found it difficult to explain to somebody because I loved the Englands just as much as I loved the Landsborough's. And it was a wonderful house with all these diverse characters and this wonderful music and everything.
So when you were growing up, I mean, what you became a teacher, didn't you? Was that the first career you had?
No. I did a whole host of things. I was a postman in Coventry. I was down and out in Coventry for about 2 weeks. I was a navvy. I was a driver. I worked on the railways, the flour mills, a grocery store manager, all sorts of things.
So how did you end up in Coventry? How did that happen?
Well, a friend of mine arrived at the house. I thought, I haven't got a job. I was sort of skint. And a friend of mine from the army arrived in a big wagon, and we went out and had a few drinks. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to Coventry on Monday. I said, there's plenty of work there, I can't get a job here. I thought, I'm going to make a fortune in the car factories. So he said, well, wait for me, and I'll pack my job up and I'll come with you. So we went down to Coventry, and he got a job straight away because he could drive. I couldn't get a job at all, so I was walking the streets of Coventry, and which was a bit of a, it was wonderful in a way. I always remember stood in a doorway, I had a tenner in my hand, which was enough for a cup of coffee. And this old Irish fellow going past, he says, "Would you care to buy an old Moore's Almanac?" And I says, forgive me trying to do an Irish accent, I said, "I'm sorry, Paddy, my old mate," I said, "but I've only got a tenner to me name." And he walked on and he come back, he says, "God bless you," he says, "any man from Dublin's a friend of mine." And he gave me an old Moore's Almanac. And shortly after, when I got this job, my first week's wages, another Irishman stopped me in the town, looked down and out, and he says, you couldn't, have you got the time there, please? I said, "It's 10 to 9, Paddy," you know. And he heard the accent, and his face lit up, and he said, "You couldn't lend me 2 bob, could you know?" And I says, "No, I won't." I said, "But come with me." And I took him in the pub and bought him about 4 pints and about 5 batches, because he'd walked about 12 mile that day, and I got such a buzz out of seeing his face, because I'd been in the same situation a week before.
Right, yeah.
And I think by the end of the hour and a half that I was there, I think he had his suspicions about my sort of intentions, you know. I think he thought I was the other way or whatever, you know. And I took him back to the camp where I lived, which was like an old disused army camp that they'd done up. And I said, I thought, well, I couldn't have him in this little room with me. I don't know the man. So I said, "There's a drying out room." It was very warm. It was bitterly cold. And I gave him my ticket for breakfast in the morning. And I think by this time he was getting very doubtful about me. But I just had a great sort of feeling out of seeing him eating these bats. Drinking.
That is a fantastic feeling.
But so I've sort of experienced sort of walking the streets for a few weeks, and it wasn't very pleasant.
I can imagine, What, when did Jesus come into your life? Were your parents Christians?
No, none of the family was overtly Christian at all. And in fact, my sort of birth, if you like, into Christianity was courtesy of a primary school teacher. Right. Mr. Peake was a lovely man. I'd never even heard of Jesus, I don't think, at the time. And he told me this story of Jesus Christ. And I grew up in a rough area where, you know, as a little shy, quite timid little lad, you had to be sort of a hard case or whatever to get by, which didn't fit with me at all, you know. And this story of Jesus, I thought, I came out of that class feeling absolutely elated. And I was sort of thinking, yes, it's great, I'm going to live forever. And it's good to be good. You don't have to be bad, you know. This is great. And when I came out, there was an old gentleman, and I was very shy, an old bird carrying a bag. And I thought, I've got to do something for this Jesus I've just heard of, you know. What can I do? And I said, "Hey, mate, can I carry a bag for you, mister?" And he turned to me with a nice sort of kindly smile and said, "Ah, no, son." He said, "Mother, that's very nice of you. Thank you, son." And I ran home full of this wonderful feeling that I had. And I began to sneak into churches because of the feeling that I got when I was in there, and began to read religious books. And of course, my brothers saw me. He said, what are you reading there?" And he'd pick it up, and I was reading, and he'd say, "Oh, you see what Holy Joe's reading here, you know." And so they ridiculed this sort of infant faith out of me. And I buried it for until I was about 30. I argued against it vehemently, you know, when I was in the army and things like that. But it nagged away at me all the time and wouldn't let me be. And when I was playing in the pubs and things, and I came out the pub this day with this thing still burning away in me, and I thought, I'm going to go and hit somebody with all these questions. And I come out this pub where I played for 22 years, and I said, I'm going to go in every church I come to till I find somebody who'll give me some answers, you know. And the first church I went into was a Catholic church just near the pub. Nobody in there. Sat there for 10 minutes, got in my car, drove to the next one, and they were holding, I think it was a funeral service, and the sidesman at the door said, "How can I help you, son?" I said, "Can I speak to the minister, please?" And he said, and he went and brought him. He said, "What is it, son?" I said, "I'd like to talk to you, you know." He said, "Well, I'm conducting a funeral service now." He said, "But come to my house on Friday and I'll talk to you for as long as you like, you know." So I went on, I'd sobered up by Friday, so it was a bit of a wrench for me to go, you know. But I thought, all right, I'll go, you know, forced myself. And I went and hit him with all this aggression, if you like. And he just disarmed me completely and answered everything in a very kindly way. And just changed me completely. And at the end of it, I always he said, kneel down, son, and we'll say a little prayer, you know. And I felt incensed at that. I thought, you know, say a little prayer, you know. And I don't know why, but I was sort of angry at that. But I said the little prayer, and as I left...
Did you feel embarrassed about it?
Embarrassed, yeah, that was the word, yeah. And as I left, I felt euphoric, you know. I thought, this is fantastic. All this rubbish that was lifted, and I felt great. And he must have regretted sort of introducing me, because I pestered the life out of him. I was there every week and hit him with all these questions, and that's where I came home that day. And my wife said, where have you been? You know, because I'd usually been in the pub. And I said, you'll never guess. Where's that then? I said, I've been to church. Oh yeah. I said, I haven't been to church. I went to been to see the minister. And that was it. And I remember when I did come to the Lord again, I did shortly after, I did something which I was a bit ashamed of. And I stayed away from the church, and I met the vicar in the bank. And he said, I haven't seen you for a week or two, Charlie. I said, no, I said I wasn't well. I told a lie. I was perfectly well. But when I went back and met him, and I said, listen, I told you a lie the other day. I said I wasn't ill at all. I said there was nothing wrong with me, but I'd done something I was ashamed of. I felt I didn't deserve to be here. And he said, Charlie, he said, you were with the devil for many years. He said, he's not going to let you go that easy. No. He said, if you'll find that if you were a drunk, you'll be enticed into getting drunk again. If you are chasing ladies, you'll find that they'll be throwing themselves at you. He said, whatever your weakness is, the devil will approach you with those weaknesses, you know. So I thought, well, that's absolutely wonderful. And then somebody came, because I wouldn't dismiss anybody. The Jehovah's Witnesses came to the house. And I thought, well, I'll have to listen to what they say. So I started going to the church with them, and then I'd go and relay this to the vicar. And I think what did it in the end, he would sort of sit there and say, Charlie, the Almighty, he said, imagine the wisdom of the Almighty is a diamond. He said, and they pick on one particular facet, the justice, and they miss out all these other parts, and that's what they focus upon. He said, but it's more than that, it's love and all that. And slowly but surely it dawned on me that that was the wrong pathway. And I think it culminated with me saying to them, so tell me this, are you saying that if say Albert Schweitzer or Sister Mother Teresa is not with you, they're condemned? And he said, yes. And I said, well, I said, the God that I believe in, I said, even I love some people too much to do that. I'm sure the Almighty will do. So that was the end of that. And then along came the Mormons who visited me. And I listened to they put something on the television and showed me this program about their way of life. And at the end of it, I said, well, listen, I saw a lot about the Mormon church on that. I saw very little mention of Jesus Christ. And I said, listen, you're very welcome if you're ever passing here to call in for a cup of tea or whatever. And gladly, I said, but I don't think I'll be joining your church. And I went upstairs, and I know it sounds very simplistic. I said, I'll open the Bible and there'll be an answer on this page to all these things that are hitting me. And on the bottom of the page, it just said, they will say, I am here, I am there, do not believe them. So I thought, that's it. So, and then on my sort of spiritual journey, I'm a bit of a spiritual gypsy. I was enamoured of the Irish people, which I still am, and the Catholic people that I'd met, and I became a Catholic in Ireland. And then shortly after, about a year later, I began to question some of the beliefs of the Catholic Church. And I still love the people, but I disagreed with a huge amount of what was being said in Catholicism. I didn't believe in purgatory or praying to saints and things like that. And the reverence of Mary almost above Christ. So I sort of dispensed with that. And now I hope my journey's at an end, because I go to a Bible-believing Pentecostal church. Right. And I'm very happy there, and I don't find anything that I can argue with. No. So from that moment on, it sort of came out. You weren't embarrassed about it. You didn't keep it from your family. Or? No. Everybody. In fact, I used to go in the pub, and all the lads would say, because I knew all the scoundrels in the town, and they're still friends of mine. And they'd say, Charlie's gone round a bend. You know, he's a religious nut. You know. And they used to attack me in the pub. And they'd say, having a go. I said, listen, why are you all getting so angry? I said, this Jesus that I believe in, demands of me that I be as good a person as I can be, that I love people. I don't want anybody's money, anybody's wife. I said, I want to be a good person. I said, why are you all getting so angry? And slowly but surely, he'd say, he's round with Ben, but he's all right, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think people have a tendency to criticise what they don't understand, really.
Well, they do, and they want you to be, they feel comfortable when you're all going downhill together. So if something says to them, no, hang on, by the way that you live, if they sort of say, hang on, he doesn't subscribe to that anymore, they feel uncomfortable with that, because it's like shining a little bit of his light, hopefully, into the lives of those people where you used to be, you know. So
when you were working in these pubs in Birkenhead, I bet you worked in the Atlantic, didn't you?
I did. I played in the Atlantic,
Did you have ambitions, or did you ever think you'd become as successful as you did at that point, or did you just think that would be, you know, you just perform in pubs and clubs forevermore?
No, I think that although I was sort of, it wasn't about the fame and the fortune. It was about the music. I thought, like, I'd like to do something better. So I began to write out of frustration because I wanted to sing, and I thought, I'd like to sing in a better situation. And I began to write, and ironically began to get a reputation as a songwriter.
Right.
And the success came many years later. I mean, in fact, I was 53 at the time. That I 53 when the break came. But I suppose it was a yearning to sort of to show the gift that God gave me to a wider audience than just a pub in the you know, down the town where I lived, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a sort of yearning for recognition, if you like, for the gift that God gave me.
Yeah, and when being a Christian, because you were a Christian then, weren't you? What do you think that sort of in the career that you've had? Do you think it hinders you? Do you think it helps you? Christianity to the wider world is becoming more of an alien thing, that I think, than it's ever been before. Where does that stand in the career that you have?
Well, I remember once being given an award in Dublin. I got the award for...
You won it 3 times, didn't you, for the male vocalist of the year, sort of?
That was in England, but this was quite a prestigious award in Dublin. And all sorts of people were there, all the hierarchy of popular music at the time. I mean, Van Morrison, the Spice Girls, and Wet, 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 and everybody was all there. And I won the Country Music Album of the Year. I think it was only because they couldn't get the likes of the big American stars to come over. But nonetheless...
That's typically you, Chad.
No, nonetheless...
No, it's because it was good. That's why you won it.
Nonetheless, I won it. But when I went up, they all gave a little speech and everything. And I said, amongst my thanks, I said thanks to the people who, you know, the company that I work with and all the people who'd helped me, and thanks to my Saviour Jesus Christ. And that sort of, everybody, it was a deathly hush. It wasn't a cool thing to say. No. But I couldn't care less whether it's a cool thing to say. It's who I am and what I believe. Yeah. So it's like me, I mean, I've been pulled up a couple of times by lads in the town, all right, Jesus, and I say, no, son, I'm not, but I believe in him and I love him, you know. Do you like, yeah? So I'm very proud to profess my faith, wherever, and if it's unfashionable, I couldn't care less, you know.
No. Do you think, you know, going back to your family, did your mum or your dad ever see your success? Did they see you have a massive hit record?
No. My mum died when I was only like 11.
Oh, right.
And my dad died when I was about 20, so they never saw, and some of my brothers never saw much of it really. So that's one of the sad aspects of what I did, what happened to me. And I would love my mum to have seen it, and I'd love to have been able to shower her with all the things that she never had, because she lived, we lived very simplistically, and everything she had. She was a great giver, although she wasn't overtly a Christian. She was very good-hearted. And people say, you wouldn't remember your mum. She was, I remember it, and I remember the kindness that was in her. And one of the things that struck me, there was an older lady round the corner who was very, very dirty, but had a heart of gold, Lizzie. And she looked a bit like a witch, really, but she was lovely. And she was always in and out the house, and my mother would lend her butter and eggs and things. And she came in this day, and my mother's sister was there, who was a little bit highfalutin and a bit, you know, sort of frowned upon where we were and where we lived and everything. Sat there in all her finery, and Lizzie came in, and she had her old dress on, and out the top of it she pulled this £1/2 of margarine or whatever, said, "There, Aggie, there's the margarine," you know. And when she'd left, Eve, my mother's sister, turned to her, she said, "Aggie, who on earth was that?" She said, "That's Lizzie." she said, well, I hope I never see her again in here.
Oh.
And she said, I suggest you don't call again, if that's the case. She said, because Lizzie is a friend of mine and always will be, you know. And I thought, well, that's great, you know.
That's fantastic.
Sitting in the corner.
Absolutely, yeah.
So she was great-hearted, a character who supposedly, at that time, there was an anti-sort of Catholic thing, and, you know, there was a bit of a religious divide, which, you know, like there is in Northern Ireland, less so where we lived. But was supposedly, we didn't like Catholics, you know. And next door was a family of Catholics who we loved very much, and my mother was always giving them and look after them, you know. So it was a bit of a different world to what it is now.
Yeah. Tell me about your teaching days. Were you a primary school teacher, weren't you?
Primary school, yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, I'd had a decent education,
Yeah.
and I'd squandered it somewhat. But I was down a hole, chiseling away at a gas main in the middle of winter. And I thought, oh, this is awful, you know, I can't be doing this when I'm 50 odd. What can I do, you know? So in the pub that week, I met a friend of mine, and he said, why don't you go into teaching? And I thought, teaching? He said, yeah, you've got an education. So I applied, and I went and sat an exam, and they accepted me. And I went straight from drilling a road out with a jackhammer on a Friday. And on Monday, I'm sitting in this Ethelwermald College in Liverpool, listening to Mozart. I thought, this is a good move, you know. And part of what attracted me, I thought, this is a nice soft touch, you know. What an easy job after all these jobs I'd done, Army and Navy and all the rest of it. That was the hardest job I ever had in my life, you know. And I trained for 3 years. In fact, one of my best friends in there was the wonderful Jimmy McGovern, who wrote...
Oh, the writer, Jimmy.
Fantastic writer, and a lovely man as well.
Yeah.
And that was... I
He's
went...
written some incredible stuff, Jimmy.
Even then, but some of it was a little bit sort of crude, you know. Thankfully, all that disappeared. You can see the quality of the writing was still there. And he can write the most moving things. He told me once, he said, read that, Charles. And it was a little passage he'd written about him growing up. And he lived in an overcrowded house. And he got very little attention from his father because of that situation. And this morning, he said his brother had weed over his back in bed. And he got up and he thought, oh. So he cleaned himself off and he went and sat down. And his dad had a big fire roaring. And it was just him and his dad. And he had his dad's attention, even though that dad was a bit gruff and that night. And the way he wrote about it sounds so simplistic, and his dad said, go and make a cup of tea, Jimmy. So he went and described him making this cup of tea and how he felt and everything, coming back and giving the tea to it. It sounds nothing, but to have written something so beautiful out of such a small picture. So he always had that incredible talent, and he would do the clever stuff. So if we had something to do between us, if it was geography or something, I would do it. But if it was anything really clever, Jimmy would do it, you know.
Right.
If anything that needed any clever writing, Jimmy would do it. He always had that wonderful flair, but a lovely man as well.
Did you enjoy, how long were you a teacher for?
4 years.
Did you enjoy it?
Part of it.
Yeah.
I was very, very glad when I left. 14 years, I said 4 years. 14
But you were
years.
performing by then, were you?
Yeah, I used to get requests in the playground. I was playing in the pub of a night, and kids in the playground say, hey, sir, my mum said, would you play Crazy tonight? You know? So I had wonderful experiences, and some of the songs that were very good to me came from my teaching, because I'd do an assembly, and whenever I did an assembly, I'd write the plot and the story, and I would always write a song to go with it. And I was doing an assembly on friendship, and with wonderful intervention by the Almighty, my sister wrote me this card. It wasn't her birthday or anything, but she's that type of person. It said, to Charlie, my forever friend. And I thought, what a great title for a song, you know.
I was going to ask you about that song. Yeah.
So I wrote this song, and I got a little lad called Paddy, he must be about 6'4" now, to sing it to the school. And then I buried the song for a while. And then years later, I was performing somewhere on an Easter Sunday at a country music festival and sang the song and got this wonderful response to it. So although I decried and bemoaned my fate as a teacher, when I left, my wife said, you should be very thankful, because out of those years teaching came songs like My Forever Friend, Things My Ears Can Do, If Only I Had Wings, Special, and the songs that I'd written for assembly. And I met some fantastic children and some great members of staff that are still friends, you know.
Yeah. My Forever Friend is an amazing song. I must admit, it's one of my favourite songs that you've ever done. It's wonderful, that song. Reminds me of my mother.
Yeah,
and my mother passed away probably before it ever became known. But it's just because it's about Jesus, isn't it?
Of course it is. Yeah.
Do you find? I mean, you had your first hit was Colour.
What Colour is the Wind?
What Colour's the Wind?
Yeah.
Well,
it was the two songs together actually.
Well, we're going to take a break now, and we're going to play My Forever Friend.
Thank you.
And we'll come back and speak a bit more later.
Dear.
Thanks, Charlie.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks to you.
This is for my Saviour, Jesus Christ. Everybody needs a little help sometimes. No one stands alone. Makes no difference if you're just a child like me, or a king upon a throne. For there are no exceptions. We all stand in the line. Everybody needs a friend. Let me tell you of mine. He's my forever friend. My leave me never friend. From darkest night to rainbow's end, he's my forever friend. Even when I turn away, he cares for me. His love no one can shake. Even as I walk away, he's by my side. With every breath I take. And sometimes I forget him. My halo fails to shine. Sometimes I'm not his friend, but he is always mine. He's my forever friend. My leave me never friend. From darkest night to rainbow's end, he's my forever friend. If you still don't know the one I'm talking of, I think it's time you knew. Long ago and far away upon a cross, my friend died for you. So if you'd like to meet him, but don't know what to do, ask my friend to your heart. He'll be your friend too. He's my forever friend. My leave me never friend. From darkest night to rainbow's end, he's my forever friend. Jesus is my best pray. Thank you very much. You are marvellous, as always. Thank you.
I just want to ask you, how many albums have you released? Is it 10 or 11 or?
I think it's more than that. I think it's something like 20 odd, but
Is it?
It's far more than I ever thought I would have. And my sort of recording career, I despaired of anybody ever recording me. So many years ago, I did a little tape. I went to the basement of a church in Bolton, actually.
Right.
And I recorded 11 of my own songs.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife was moaning at me at the time, saying, "You're spending the only money we've got on doing this tape and we can't afford it." But it was probably the best move I made, sort of artistically, because a number of those songs started to be recorded by other people. And it laid the foundation for what happened to me later. But yeah, I've got a lot of albums now, which I never thought I'd have, Jim.
So do you spend a certain amount of your working life just writing? Do you spend certain days writing, or do you just do it as and when it comes to you? How does it work?
No, I'm one of those people. I disappear into my own little room. I've got a study now. I thought only toffs had studies, but I've got my own room now with me books in and all my memorabilia and everything. And I disappear in there and I write. I force myself to write, and very often with no end result at all. And I come out of there very often thinking that was a waste. But what in effect it is, it's a stepping stone to the next one when you do write something. And you can never tell or prescribe. You can't say, this is the formula, I'll follow this formula and it'll work, So, no, it's wonderful for the odd occasion when you do sort of strike it lucky, And
You're obviously a very deep feeling man, because all your songs have got incredible lyrics, haven't they? They're all sort of telling a story. When you sit down to write, what comes first? Does a tune come into your head, or do you write words down and build a tune round it?
Yeah, that's the question everybody asks, and understandably so. It's a mixture really, but I sit with a guitar. I've got an old acoustic guitar, and I sit at my desk, and very often I can think of nothing to write. I mean, songs can come about from that. I mean, I looked out my back window one day and thought, what can I write about? And I thought, it's raining outside. So I wrote a song called It's Raining Outside, which is a bit daft because it's never raining inside unless your house is,
that's true,
But it's amazing. I listen to what people say, things that people say, and you can get great inspiration from. I mean, one of the stories I tell is that I wrote a song called Passing Through, and I was in Dublin Airport, and there was a number of people getting off a plane, and passing was an older gentleman who came over to me, spotted me, and I was sort of very big in Ireland at the time, and came over and said really nice things to me about the music. And I said, "Oh, thank you very much." I said, "You've been away on holiday?" And he said, "Ah, no, son." He says, "I live your side now." I said, "Oh, even better, you're going home on holiday." He said, "Ah, no, son." He said, "I'm going down to Limerick. My brother's just passed away." Oh. And I said, "Well, I'm very sorry to hear that." I said, "Yeah, that's a very sad reason for going home. You have my greatest sympathy, And he turned to me with this lovely, warm, benign smile and said, "Ah, son, we're all just passing through." And off he tootled, and I remembered that and wrote a song that I often wondered, did he ever get to realise that he inspired it? Yeah. So I'm listening for phrases. I mean, my brother, we were working on an old car I had one time, and he managed to fix something. I said, "Johnny, how do you do those things?" And he said, "That's a good title for a song, child." So I wrote a romantic ballad which has got nothing to do with old cars. Yeah. Just based upon a phrase that I said that he picked up on. So you're ever listening, not listening into other people's conversations.
No,
but listen for something that's said that you think, oh, that might trigger something. Or looking at somebody's situation and seeing what's happening in their life. And I mean, I wrote 2 songs about 2 older people that I met from church. One was called Saints, for the lady in the house, and the other one was called was for old Alf Pritchard, who sort of was left in the house on his own. Walking on My Memories was written for him, that people can associate with. And so you're always on the lookout and listening to your own imagination. And sometimes I said I take my pencil for a walk around a piece of paper and just write anything. And sometimes something will emerge that sparks you off. Sometimes I'll start with an idea, and then halfway down I'll write something different I think is a better idea than the original one. Yeah. It's very, very chaotic, and far greater songwriters than me have said exactly the same thing.
Yeah. So do you read music?
No.
Can you sort of write it all down on paper?
No. Because,
So you just, what do? You just sort of sing the tune to the band and they pick it up?
I sing into, in fact I used to laugh because I used to sing into an old tape. And all you could hear was this hiss. They used to call it the white noise albums, because all you hear is my Scouse accent and in the background. And so it was very poor. Now I've gone up markets, but I've got a CD player with an inbuilt mic, and I just sing into that. Then farm it off to the producer, who sort of brings in all the real players and everything, and it comes to life from there. But yeah, and going back to the music thing, when I went to college, I started off in the religious department, and I was sort of shattered because nobody believed in there. And the lecturer was a very cynical man, and I remember him saying one day, who believes in heaven? And I was the only one with my hand up. He said, oh, do you? He said, what's it like then? I said, I don't know. He said, you don't know, but you believe in it. I said, I don't know. I said, all I know is Jesus is there. And I said, wherever he is, that's where I want to be, you know. And I was they were all sort of looking at me in very cynical looks on their faces, and I thought, this is no good. And you were part of your course, you were doing bits in other areas, so I was doing music. And the lady would say, go away and compose something for a sunset. And, you know, be as imaginative as you can. And she would come back and say, wonderful, you know. So I thought, this is great. And they said, why don't you swap over to the music departments, which I did, thank God.
Yeah.
So, and they taught us music, and although I can't really write, I understand what it is. I wrote piano pieces for the piano.
Right.
And I did it in very sort of, you know, I'd say, yeah, that's all right. And I'd do it. I couldn't play it, but I wrote these pieces, gave them to her, and I've still got them now. And they had these sort of names like Elephantasia and all sorts of wonderful imaginative titles. And when she played them, I'd say, no, a bit slower please, Mrs. Hartley. Wonderful woman she was. And she played them all, and all the students stood up and gave me a standing ovation.
Fantastic.
So although I couldn't play them myself, it was a revelation to me to hear them in their entirety when she played them effortlessly. So no, I can't read music, but I can. I put it down on a CD now.
That's brilliant. So you've got this big hit record, and it changed your life. You're working in the pubs and the clubs, struggling on, and then all of a sudden you're catapulted into fame, into these big auditoriums. Lots of people are coming to see you. How did you cope with that?
With great difficulty, because suddenly this success happened, and they said, put the band. They had recorded an album in Birmingham, and it was going to be buried. But Jerry Anderson, a wonderful broadcaster from Northern Ireland who passed away.
I remember Jerry Anderson.
He was a wonderful man and a great supporter for me. He started playing tracks off it, and then they put me on the telly. Somebody else wasn't available, so they put me on Pebble Mill, I think it was. And got this wonderful reaction, and then I got my own slot on Irish television. I despaired of anything ever happening, and I'd had another rejection, and I come away from the phone thinking, this isn't meant to be, you know. But the next day the spirit re-emerged, and I thought, no, I'm not giving up. What can I do instead of moaning about it? And I phoned RTE in Dublin and said, would you be interested in having me? And they said, Charlie, we've been trying to get you for a month, can you come this week? So I went with just an acoustic guitar, and I used to play the bass pedals with my feet. And I sang, I was scheduled to do one song, and he said, if I call you back, will you do a second? And I did Forever Friends.
Was this on Pat Kenny's show?
Yeah. They called me back, and I did the second song, and the following week I was top of the Irish charts. And this was preceded, to put the spiritual slant on it, the previous year in '94, after years of arguing with the Lord, saying, why did you give me this gift when everywhere I turn I get rejected, you know? What's the point? Because I believe this is the best gift that you gave me. And yet I get nowhere, I get rejected everywhere. And I gave up in '94. I said, all right, Lord, I give in. Your will be done. If you want me to be a teacher in Birkenhead, I'll do it, but you'll have to help me out because I don't like it very much, you know. And it is almost as if from that spiritual submission that the whole thing began to happen. And in January it came to fruition, January of '95, with this one appearance on the Pat Kenny show. And then suddenly I was taken from the Dockside pub, a band put round me, and taken to Ireland, and then I'm playing in these huge auditoriums, jam-packed because I'm top of the Irish charts, singing to audiences and not really knowing my own songs, because although I'd written them, people in the pubs didn't want to listen to Charlie Landsborough singing Charlie Landsborough songs. I'd stick an odd one in now and again. I was doing covers, so I had this terrifying experience of sitting out at the front of a stage with a huge jam-packed auditorium in front of me, the lads in the band in darkness about 5 yards back, and it was exhilarating but terrifying at the same time.
I can imagine, yeah. Did you feel pressure, more pressure at working in that environment?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
think
theatres are a joy to work in, aren't they, really?
Oh, fantastic, after, playing in pubs where there's fights going on and arguments and everything. And one of the pub I played in was wonderful for characters. I mean, I was playing one Sunday dinner hour and I had them all hushed listening to me singing Vincent's, beautiful song by Don McLean. And suddenly there was a V-shaped pub like that, with a door one side of the V and a door the other. And this fella came through the door with a horse. You never saw many horses in Birkenhead. Right through and out the other door, and it left a message on the floor as it went. And he wasn't doing it sort of laughing for a joke. And to this day, we don't know who he was.
Wow,
he walked through,
that's amazing, though.
and shattered the whole illusion I was trying to create, But it was a great pub in that respect, and I enjoyed immensely some of the characters I met and some of the experiences. But doing the theatres is wonderful. But initially, it was terrifying, and for the first couple of years, I think I drank my way through it, to my great shame, I think, because the pressures were immense.
But you started to do your own songs then, didn't you?
Oh, when I toured, it was all my own songs. With an odd cover thrown in, because that's what people in Ireland knew me for. That's all they knew me for, was my own songs.
So, as a performer, who inspired you? What singers inspired you?
Well, there's a huge variety going back. I loved all the old crooners like Bing and Perry Como. And then, I loved all the great, along came rock and roll, of course, which I just picked me. Lonnie Donegan, when I first started playing the guitar, I thought it was great. And then, of course, along came Jerry Lee and Elvis and all the rest. So I was sort of rode on that little wave for a while. And then along came all the great singer-songwriters, Gordon Lightfoot, Bob Dylan, the Beatles.
Did you ever get to meet any of those people? Did you ever meet Jerry Lee? Because I know Jerry Lee played Liverpool, didn't he? In the last 10 or 15, I remember seeing him at the Empire.
Yeah. No, I've met some.
And Chuck Berry was on the same bill.
Yeah. No, I never met either of them. But I met Don Everly, who was lovely. And I sat on the back porch with John Prine, who I thought was fantastic. I met Charlie Pride and all sorts of people. And the nice thing about these experiences, you hear these horror stories about people in the business. Virtually everybody I've met has been lovely.
Yeah.
And sitting on the back porch with John Prine, I'm still amazed to this day when I mention him and people have never heard of him. I think he's a sort of country folk equivalent of like Bob Dylan, who writes incredible lyrics. So sitting on his back porch, drinking a bottle of beer and playing, swapping songs was wonderful, and a lovely man who sounds as good on his back porch as he does on an album. And I've met actors and people like Richard Bryars, who I thought was fantastic.
Oh, he's amazing, isn't he?
Well, I went up and said, Richard, thanks for all the pleasure you've given me. He didn't know who on earth I was. I said, but my favourite was Ever Decreasing Circles. And he said, it was mine too, son, thank you. I met Willie Nelson down in Brisbane, who was wonderful.
You look like his twin.
Well, that's what they said. I've got a photograph. He's a bit smaller than me.
Yeah.
But I was able to pass this message on to him because the Aussies knew me. He didn't have a clue who I was. And I was getting photographs taken with him and with these people. But I said, Willie, thanks, I'm a great fan. I love your music and you've got a very unique style. And I said, a great compliment was paid to you by a friend of yours. He said, what was that? I said, I met a friend of yours in Ireland. And I said, I love Willie Nelson. What's he like as a person? He said, of all the people in the business, the least affected by success I've ever met is Willie Nelson. And he said, gee, who said that? That's very kind. I said, it was Chris Christopherson. And he's looking at me as if to say, who is this fella? I met Christopherson, who was lovely as well in Southern Ireland.
They were in a band together, weren't they, in a highway with Johnny Cash?
The Highwaymen, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
But he was lovely as well, and so the people that I have met, I had the good fortune to meet. People like George Best, who I thought was lovely, So
very talented George,
incredible, and a lovely bloke as well.
Yeah,
really
he was the only footballer I've ever seen that was cheered by the opposition when he came on.
Well, and rightly so.
That was the talent that he had. It's unbelievable.
Well, a bit like little Messi in Spain now. He should be cheered by everybody. But so my experiences of people in the business, all walks of the business, acting as well as music, have been good. They've been lovely people.
Is there any particular person that you'd like to have met in the business that you've not met?
No, I think, well, there's lots of people that I would like to have met. I mean, the likes of Elvis, you know, you'd say, oh, it'd be great to have met him. The Beatles, who I should have met. I mean, I should have been on the same bill as them, because I was playing lead guitar, which shows how primitive the band was, you know, because if you ever heard me play guitar, I'm not a lead guitar player, really. At the time, I wasn't too bad, but they were doing a gig in Wallasey, not far from where I lived, called the Grosvenor Ballroom. And the lads, I was playing with a band called the Top Spots, who became, I think, later on the Undertakers. And they said, tell Charlie not to let us down tonight, we're doing the Grosvenor with the Silver Beatles. And I never turned up and missed the chance of meeting them in their sort of formative years, if you like, when they were the Silver Beatles. And then the lad who played in a country band with Eddie Clayton, I think Ringo was his best man when he got married. And Ringo, when they bought Apple, sent this letter up to Eddie and said, Eddie, you're still doing that country stuff, mate. He said, send us something down and we'll do it for you. And he never did. So you sort of think, if it had been me, I'd have been down there. But I'd like to have met them, of course,
Yeah. Also, when you look at your career now, it must give you I mean, you are aware, aren't you, of the joy that you give to people. I know you're a very modest man, aren't you? But the joy that you give to people. I mean, I remember you did a TV show at Revelation TV where you actually sang and chatted and that kind of thing. And the response to that was incredible. People were in the studio in tears, not because they wanted you to get off, it was because they were so moved by what you were doing.
Oh, well, that's nice. But well, of course, you become aware that what you're doing has an effect on people. And that's very humbling. And every single night when I go to bed, amongst the prayers of thanks, and I've got a lot to be thankful for, I say, thank you for this gift, Lord, the musical gift you gave me, and for all the pleasure that it's enabled me to give to other people, and they've given to me, because it's a reciprocal thing, you know. So I'm very conscious of the fact that music can touch and move people, and I said it's the ultimate drug in a nice way, because you do something, write something and create something, and find that it brings pleasure.
Absolutely, It
brings
meaning as well.
Consolation or meaning to somebody. You want to keep repeating it, you know. So it's a blessing.
Have you ever written stuff that you thought this will never be a success, or have you written stuff that you thought would be a success and hasn't been a success?
Yeah, both. I mean, I've written songs that I buried. I mean, I've got a drawer about 4 foot high, a chest of drawers, if you like, full of tapes with ideas on, and I've got a drawer about 2 feet wide or whatever, and it's full of books back to back with lyrics in, which sounds wonderful, but I suppose only a very tiny percentage of that is worth anything. But at times you can surprise yourself. I remember looking through a book, and I'd written a song for a school assembly called Special, and I got a little girl to sing it to the whole school, and the essence of it was that we're all special in God's eyes, you know, everybody. I used to say to the kids in school, listen, love, especially those with low self-esteem, there was never anybody walked the face of the earth like you before or ever will again. You're a one-off, you know. So I wrote this song called Special, and a little girl who was having a tough time sang it to the school, and particularly to her own mother. And I buried that song, and I found it and recorded it with a little school choir from the Midlands, and I got the opportunity of singing that at the Special Olympics in Dublin. And that had an effect on quite a lot of people. So, and I'd forgotten that. So occasionally you can look back and surprise yourself. And when I did that Special Olympics, I'd read a book in one of these fireside books or something. I read a story in a fireside book about the Special Olympics. And it said a lot of Down syndrome children and things. And they set off in the 100 metres dash or whatever it was. The gun went and they all started running down the track. And one little lad had fallen at the start and hurt himself. And as they were running, they heard him crying, and they all stopped, and they all went back, picked him up, and they all ran down the track together and crossed the line together. And I thought that was beautiful, and the whole stadium rose and it gave them a huge applause. And I sang to this like sea of faces, and somebody said, that must have been sad. I said, you're joking, aren't you? I've never seen a more joyous crowd of people. It took me about 2 hours to get out, because they all want to put their arms around you and kiss you and thank you, you know. So, and that came about through a song that I'd, as I say, I'd forgotten for years.
Tell me what inspired My Forever Friend. What?
Well, that was a letter from my sister saying to Charlie, my forever friend, and me writing this song for another school assembly that my wife said I should be thankful for. And I thought, and although it was me writing it in almost childlike terms, and I suppose the message is, no matter who you are, how big you are, fame or physique or whatever else, you know, ultimately you're going to need the forever friend who is our Lord Jesus Christ. And I think the simplicity of it, it gets to people. I didn't realise at the time that that song would have an impact upon people. A little lad at the time called Paddy, who's now a big tall lad, sang it to the school, and got a lovely reception in the school from the staff and everything. And I forgot that song and played it again. I was doing a country music festival in Norfolk, and it was Easter Sunday, so I sang the song. Got this wonderful response to it, kept on playing it. And I've heard all sorts of things, like it was played in the, I sang it in the Tune Cathedral to a gathering of all the sorts of Irish elite, if you like, from the church and from politics. It was played in, I think it was a church in Cathedral in Boston on, Easter Sunday or something. So I didn't realise at the time the impact that song would have upon me as well as upon.
No, that's what I was asking you before. I mean, you can't possibly be aware at the time, can you?
No.
Of what it's going to do to people.
No, well, it's similarly the other song that helped me was "What Colour Is the Wind," and I was playing at a club in Southport, not far from where I live, and
that was the first big song, wasn't it?
Yeah. And a lad appeared, an old friend of mine who used to sing around the country music clubs. And we had a pint together, and he said, "Charlie, I've got a title for you." He said, "The blind girl was overheard saying this to her father," or his father, I don't know whether it was a boy or a girl. And they said, "What colour is the wind?" And I thought, he said, I can do nothing with it, so I'm giving it to you. And I said, amongst the birthday, it was my birthday, amongst the presents I was given that day, CDs and books and everything, that was by far the greatest. And I went away and wrote the song, and which was a very daunting task, because to try and write other things without stepping over the line into the maudlin and slushy was very difficult. And when I'd written it, I called my middle son Alan in, who can be very forthright and honest. And I said, "What do you think of this, Al?" And he said, "It's all right, it's quite surreal, that. Yeah, you can play that, Dad." So the first time I ever played it, the chap who'd given me the title was in the audience in Blackpool, in a pub I played in, and got this fantastic response. And everywhere I played it, I kept getting this wonderful response. And people were asking me for the song, people who'd already had some success. And my wife said, "If you give that away," she said, "I'll strangle you." So to avoid strangulation, I kept it. And thank God I did, because it did the trick for me. Yeah,
it's amazing. It's been a joy speaking to you, Charlie. It's been a joy to meet you. The thing that I wanted to say to you is, what advice would you give to anybody that's got a talent like yours that's just starting out? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say, believe in yourself, plough your own musical furrow, find your own musical fingerprints, be inspired inspired by all the other people that you can. I have been inspired by many, many people, and stick to it and face rejection, because if you do get rejected, there's far greater people than me and you out there. The Beatles, Elvis Presley, they were all rejected, and I think on my side all the time was the Almighty. So if you've got Him, then you've got everything. You know, I would say, whatever the situation is and whatever walk of life you're in, the first thing you need to do is to be right with Him and to find Him. Absolutely, find your way back to the good Lord Jesus Christ. So all of those things, believe in Him, find your own path to follow musically. Be yourself. You know, it sounds, years ago when people would say, "Be yourself," I'd say, who else can you be? You know, you can only be. But it's not. There's an awful lot of people out there who are doing what they think the world would like them to do, instead of saying, "Well, who am I?" Be the best person you can be. God made you individual. Be as much of that individual as you can, musically and in every other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Are any of your children in the business?
Not in the business, no. They can all play.
Yeah.
And I've got two lads who are great guitar players, and they both write. In fact, one of them's got an album out, but little heard of, you know. Yeah. But they all love music. It's in the family, and we'll carry on. And my grandkids, they love the music too. One of them's learning drums, the other one wants to learn the guitar. So hopefully it will carry on, Jim. Yeah.
Your band, your fantastic band. You've got a great lead guitarist, haven't you?
Well, it's changed, but I've got another one now. The lead guitarist you're probably talking of was John Pettifer, who I think is world class, who's moved to Ireland. And I've always been lucky in being surrounded by fantastic musicians. The drummer that we used to have was Jerry.
Are they all from Birkenhead?
No. No, I said it's a real mixed bag because originally they were all Brummies. Who were to be?
Oh, that's funny. See, that would be fun.
It's
that
lovely, yeah. And Jerry was Shirley Bassey's drummer for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And there was absolutely, I was sort of thunderstruck when I said, Charlie, we've had this break in Ireland, we've got to put this band around you. And I'm sitting there singing my own songs to this wonderful musical backdrop that they'd all provided. Incredible musicians, and I've always been very blessed in the people around me musically and in every other sense, you know. So yeah, I'm lucky.
Charlie, it's been an absolute honour. Thank you so much for
pleasure.
doing this today. I appreciate it. Love you to bits.
God bless you. Thanks very
God
much.
bless you too.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie.